Hey, this is Blake Sloan. I've been selling real estate over 14 years, and our team of highly trained professionals, along with our unmatched marketing, has sold thousands of homes here in the Myrtle Beach area, and this is how we do it.
Most people study what's the outer game, which is really the skill sets. That's the scripts, the presentations, how do I execute when I'm actually going through that part of sitting down with them face to face. Most people tend to focus most of the stuff on the outer game, and what happens is that'll only get them so far. And we're going to talk about the opposite of that today a little bit, which is the inner game, which is purely what's up here, right? Purely what's in your brain, what's in your head, really coming down to kind of beliefs, right?
Possibilities type deal?
In a way, yeah, pretty much. And the overall aspect of that is that you've got to be able to master the inner game to be able to extract the value from the outer game. So I can teach you all the scripts and have you amazing at meeting face to face and memorizing a script, but if you're not able to do the discipline of getting people face to face, making the phone calls, having the certain parts, and I'll break down 4 main parts that help you all through that to kind of keep that measure. But this is really your temperature, yourself that you gotta kind of measure and understand. But really it comes down to, what do I believe I deserve? What do I believe I'm worth? And what do I believe that is my standard for me to kind of get to? And I'll break it down for you guys a little more, but it really comes down to one of the things too, if I had to break it to one aspect, has to do your emotional state. So the inner game is an emotional part, and it has to do with the state, which we'll talk about as well. What's that mean? Tell me about the emotional state.
It's when you show up.
Right? 100%. What else?
Certainty.
Confidence, certainty. We know certainty sells. And so in a game that we do, especially when we have a very high price ticket item, again, we're not selling TVs at Best Buy, we're selling big houses that are usually for most people their largest asset or one of the largest assets they own. It's important for us to make sure that we can manage that, because we have to be able to transfer certainty and energy to them for them to be able to make a decision to obviously want to buy or sell, right? And that's just the overall psychology of how all this stuff works. But we really got to get to 4 main things that break that down. Okay, number 1 is important, most important here is state management. What do you think that means?
Managing your state of mind, consistently.
Right? Here's the one way I looked at it is important. How do I trigger the right state at the right moment? How do I trigger the right state at the right moment? Because I've got to be able to adjust and make that happen based on the situation I'm in, based on who I'm sitting in front of, based on who I'm talking to on the telephone, and really how I show up every single day. I talk about this all the time, where I can see in 2 seconds who's on and who's off just by looking at them in the meeting. Now, if I can tell that, guess who else can feel that subconsciously? Clients. And so the skill set here is, how do I master turning on the right state at the right time to be able to lead my people where I need to go? AKA my client, AKA the person that's thinking about buying or thinking about working with me. Because we're building on what we talked about last week, right? We're going to get to the 3 10s, or really the 5 10s as a combination to unlock everything, right? We want a 10, 10, 10 on what? What are they? You, your company, your product. And then we got to get to the other 10s, which is obviously 2 thresholds. What are they? Action threshold, pain threshold. And so to do that, it really starts with managing our state, right place at the right time, right? Which is very, very important to be able to trigger that and make sure you're able to have that. This state part is how you feel in that moment. The best people at this and the most advanced at this are the ones that can trigger it on demand. Trigger it on demand. Meaning, so I'm not really affected by the that happens outside the world, because I know I got to control what happens here in where my inner game, which is my inner world. If you watch people that you know, they ride that roller coaster of life based on what happens in social media, based on what happens on the outside, based on what happens in their family. And the reality is, to be elite in this game, you've got to make sure that you're able to manage number 1 at all times. And you got to be real about that, where you actually turn it on and it's real. You don't just think that you're turning it on, everybody else can see it. That's a big problem. Everybody thinks that they're on, but you're really not on because you're not hiding it very well. And so that's the one question that really creates a disconnect from what we talked about 2 weeks ago, which is rapport. And so if my state's off and they feel my state's off, what happens to rapport?
It diminishes.
it's gone. It diminishes, right? There is no rapport, and they question something about you that they wonder if this person is really who they say they are and what they say they do, which is very important. Does that make sense to you guys there? And so that's just something super important as well. Number 2, beliefs. What do you think that is? So the belief is the way you feel about your experience. And I guess you could also say on top of that is basically how you're able to have experience and emotions. And so that's your experiences and your emotions, because there's both of those. And why is that important? There's 2 types of belief. Do you guys remember what they are? There's empowering beliefs and disempowering belief. Which one do you think is the most dangerous, obviously? Disempowering. So many people have so many disempowering beliefs that it ends up hurting their ability to produce at a high level. This happens a lot of times in real estate, happens in life. It happens all the time where most people become victims of their own beliefs. And if they're in a disempowered state, they become a victim in life, which means they can't change the outcome, which also means they cannot get what they want. And so that's just something we see all the time, but that's driven by one thing that comes in that's important. That's driven by your stories. We talk about that a lot. What's a story again for somebody that's new?
The lie you tell yourself.
Right? The lies you tell yourself, the narration you tell yourself about what is or what isn't based on what's going on. And that's important to look at and understand there to be able to do that. And that's one thing that says, I was going through, is that most people walk around with stories that are so out of whack that aren't even close to reality, it costs them from getting what they want. Those could be things like, I'm not a salesperson. I don't like having to sell to people. I don't like having to put pressure on people. I'm not a natural born salesperson, right? All these things that people have, which is ultimately just what? A bullshit story, which is a disempowering belief. Because the fact is, sales persuasion, right? That whole thing is all a learned skill set. Do some have a natural ability more than others to start out with? Absolutely. But once you get to mid to high level, it's all learned skill set. And so what stops people is having that disempowering belief, that story that stops them from getting what they want. Does that make sense to you all there?